They thought burning down my house would make me join their little HOA club. What they didn't know is that I literally wrote the municipal fire codes they just violated. I'm Marcus, and I'm standing in what used to be my kitchen, holding the legal binder that sent my HOA president to federal prison for 8 years. 6 months ago, this was my family's dream home where my kids fed chickens every morning. Today, it's a pile of ash and the smoking gun that exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud conspiracy. The acrid smell of wet charcoal clings to my clothes like a ghost of the life they tried to steal. I'm drinking coffee from a thermos because, well, hard to brew anything when your kitchen is a crater. But here's what Brenda Kensington didn't count on. When you try to burn down a code enforcer's house, you better not leave evidence behind. Spoiler alert, she left everything. FBI raids, handcuffs, the whole justice buffet. What would you do if your neighbors literally tried to burn you out? Drop it in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how global this HOA nightmare really is. My name is Marcus Thorne, and for 25 years, I've been the guy who shows up when your neighbor builds a deck without permits or runs a meth lab in their garage. Municipal code enforcement officer. Basically, I'm the rulebook police. My wife Elena is a high school principal, and we have teenage twins, Dakota and River, who think I'm the most boring dad on the planet. Until this story, they were probably right. Our house sat on 2 acres of what used to be farmland, inherited from my grandfather who raised corn and dreams back in the 1940s. The property was grandfathered in when the subdivision sprouted around us like mushrooms after rain. While our neighbors got quarter-acre lots and HOA covenants, we kept our wraparound porch, vegetable garden, workshop, and yes, a small flock of chickens that provided fresh eggs and endless entertainment for the kids. Every morning I'd sit on that porch with my coffee, listening to roosters crow and watching Elena tend her herb garden. The smell of basil and oregano mixed with the earthy scent of turned soil. Dakota and River would scatter feed before school, their laughter echoing off the workshop walls where I restored old furniture on weekends. It was peaceful. It was ours. And apparently, it was driving someone absolutely insane. Enter Brenda Kensington. Picture every HOA president stereotype, then add ambition and a real estate license. Platinum blonde hair that never moved in wind, white Lexus that never had a speck of dirt, and yoga pants that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd moved from California 6 months earlier, expecting her investment to be protected by what she called community standards. Our property, with its chickens and vegetable rows and workshop clutter, wasn't exactly matching the Pinterest-perfect vision she'd paid premium prices to join. Her first visit came with homemade cookies and a warm smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, even though we'd lived there 15 years longer than she had. "I brought an HOA application, just a formality to get you connected with our wonderful community." I thanked her for the cookies and politely explained that our property predated the HOA by 3 decades. We weren't required to join, and frankly, we liked our independence. Her smile flickered like a dying light bulb. Week 3 brought a certified letter about community standards and property value protection. Week 6 escalated to anonymous complaints filed with the city about our agricultural activities in a residential zone. That's when things got interesting. See, when you've spent 25 years memorizing municipal codes, you tend to know them pretty well. I pulled out my copy, the same thick binder that would eventually help convict her, and highlighted section 12.3.7. Agricultural grandfather clauses for properties predating residential zoning. Our chickens were legal, our garden was legal, our workshop was legal. Everything was legal because I'd literally helped write the ordinances that protected properties exactly like ours. But Brenda wasn't the type to let legal technicalities stop her. The complaints kept coming. 17 separate violations reported in 1 week. Illegal chickens, unpermitted structures, commercial vegetable operations, noise disturbances. I'd arrive at work to find stacks of paperwork, all bearing Brenda's precise handwriting and our address. My supervisor, a longtime friend, pulled me aside. "Marcus, what the hell is going on with your neighbor?" That evening, I discovered something that changed everything. While reviewing the complaint forms, I noticed Brenda had listed our property as a commercial farm operation in several reports. Not only was this completely false, but filing false municipal reports is a Class C misdemeanor with a $500 fine per incident. Here's your first knowledge nugget. False reporting of code violations is a crime in most states. Always read complaint forms carefully. One lie can turn harassment into criminal charges. Elena found me at the kitchen table that night, surrounded by paperwork and code books. "What are you thinking?" she asked, setting down fresh coffee that smelled like salvation. "I'm thinking," I said, "that our new neighbor just made her first big mistake." Brenda's next move was what I call the compliance blitz, a strategy I'd seen bullies use before, but never this systematically. If one complaint didn't work, maybe 17 would do the trick. Monday, illegal chicken coop violating setback requirements. Tuesday, unpermitted workshop addition creating fire hazards. Wednesday, commercial vegetable operation without business license. By Friday, my desk looked like a paper avalanche had buried it alive. But here's the thing about being a code enforcement officer for 25 years, you develop a nose for bullshit that could smell lies through concrete. Every single complaint used identical phrasing, submitted at exactly 8:47 a.m., and contained details only visible from our property line. Someone was making this their full-time job. The kicker? Brenda had started scheduling wellness walks past our house with other HOA wives. Picture 5 women in matching athleisure, clutching phones like weapons, whispering behind manicured hands while photographing our chicken coop like it was evidence of war crimes. The constant click of phone cameras became the soundtrack to our mornings, mixing with the confused clucking of chickens who'd suddenly become Instagram famous. "This is getting ridiculous," Elena said, watching the parade from our kitchen window. "What's next, aerial surveillance?" She wasn't wrong to worry, but I was about to turn the tables. I decided to dig deeper into these complaints, and that's when I found Brenda's first major mistake. On 3 separate violation reports, she'd listed our property as a commercial farm operation, not a residential property with grandfathered agricultural rights, a full commercial farm requiring business licenses, health department inspections, and commercial zoning permits. Now, I'd seen this trick before in my career. Desperate complainants would exaggerate property descriptions, hoping to trigger different enforcement protocols. What they didn't realize is that falsely categorizing property types on official municipal reports is actually filing false instruments, a misdemeanor with fines up to $500 per incident. I'd personally prosecuted 3 cases like this, and the defendants always looked shocked when the handcuffs came out. Time for my first counterpunch. I filed a formal complaint against Brenda with the city attorney's office, documenting every false statement and requesting investigation into harassment patterns. Then I sat back and waited for the show. The city sent their newest inspector, a kid fresh out of college who'd probably never seen a real chicken coop outside Instagram. I met him at the property line with my code book, original 1963 building permits, and the surveyor's map from 1940 that showed our lot boundaries. "Let's start with the chickens," I said, flipping to the relevant section. Municipal Ordinance 12.3.7 specifically protects agricultural uses predating residential zoning. Our coop was built in 1963. The residential zoning wasn't enacted until 1987. The kid's clipboard practically sagged under the weight of Brenda's complaints. We walked the property methodically. Chickens legal, workshop permitted and inspected, vegetable garden clearly personal use scale. Every single violation got marked unfounded, with notes about harassment patterns, the sound of measuring tape zipping across garden beds mixed with satisfied clucking from vindicated chickens. Even they seemed to know justice was being served. 24 hours later, the city posted a "no violations found" notice on our front gate, a bright yellow beacon visible from Brenda's living room window. That's when I witnessed my first Brenda meltdown. I was checking the mail when she stormed across the street, her yoga pants practically smoking from the speed of her approach. "This is ridiculous!" she shouted, loud enough for 3 neighbors to peek out their windows. "That inspector obviously doesn't know what he's doing." "Ma'am," the rookie inspector called out from his truck, "this gentleman knows municipal code better than most lawyers. Everything on this property is completely legal." Brenda's face went through several shades of red before settling on a color I'd never seen in nature. "This isn't over, Marcus," she hissed, jabbing her finger toward our house. "There's more than one way to solve a property problem." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire, and I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't about chickens anymore. That evening, Elena noticed something that made my investigator instincts start twitching. "Have you seen how many people are walking past our house lately?" she asked, pulling the curtains closed. "That's the 5th car this hour that slowed down at our driveway." She was right. Our quiet dead-end street suddenly had more foot traffic than a shopping mall. Strangers with phones, unfamiliar cars cruising past, curtains twitching across the street like nervous eyelids. But the real game changer came when I decided to research our HOA president's background. What I found made my blood run cold. Brenda Kensington held real estate licenses in 3 states: California, Arizona, and now Texas. More interesting? A pattern emerged in her previous neighborhoods. Holdout properties that refused HOA membership had developed mysterious problems: a house fire in Phoenix, an accidental flood in Tucson, 3 property condemnations in San Diego, all eventually sold to developers at below-market prices, all purchased by shell companies with one common thread: Brenda Kensington as the listing agent. "Elena," I said that night, spreading property records across our kitchen table like a detective building a murder case, "I don't think we're dealing with a pushy neighbor anymore. I think we're dealing with a professional. If Brenda was a professional, she was about to show me her playbook, and honestly, it was more sophisticated than I'd given her credit for." Her next strategy was what crisis management experts call social isolation: turn the community against the target until they have no choice but to surrender. Within 48 hours of my complaint being filed, she'd organized something called the Neighborhood Safety Committee with official-sounding letterhead and everything. The flyers started appearing on windshields Tuesday morning. "Concerned about unregulated agricultural chemicals near our children? Join us in protecting Willowbrook's families." Complete with stock photos of smiling kids and a list of health concerns that would make you think our chicken coop was Chernobyl. But social media? That's where Brenda really showed her expertise. The Concerned Parents of Willowbrook Facebook group gained 87 members overnight. Posts appeared hourly, photos of our cluttered workshop labeled as potential fire hazard, close-ups of our compost pile described as rodent attractant, and my personal favorite, a picture of our rain barrel captioned "Standing Water Breeding Mosquitoes and Disease." Elena discovered the group when other teachers started asking her awkward questions. "Is it true your husband runs some kind of unlicensed farm operation?" her colleague whispered during lunch duty. I saw the photos online. The social pressure campaign extended to our kids. Dakota came home from school quiet, picking at her dinner. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Elena asked. "Nobody wanted to sit with me at lunch today," Dakota mumbled. Sarah's mom told her our house might be making people sick. River, normally our social butterfly, mentioned that his friend Tyler couldn't come over anymore. His parents said something about unsafe environment and liability issues, he explained, confusion clear in his voice. The sound of silence at our previously friendly bus stop was deafening. Empty seats around our kids at lunch. Parent conversations that stopped when Elena walked into school events. The smell of isolation was stronger than any barnyard odor Brenda claimed to be worried about. But I'd been documenting harassment campaigns for 2 decades, and I knew something Brenda didn't. Bullies always get sloppy when they think they're winning. Time for counterpunch number 2. I spent my lunch breaks researching Brenda's own properties through municipal databases, a skill I'd developed after years of tracking down slumlords and code violators. What I found was pure gold. Brenda owned 3 rental properties in our city through an LLC called Premier Property Solutions. I'd actually written several of the inspection protocols she was about to become intimately familiar with. Cross-referencing violation histories, I discovered something beautiful. 3 active code violations on her duplex rental at 847 Maple Street. Unpermitted bathroom addition from 2019. Outdated electrical panel creating fire hazards. Blocked fire exit due to illegal storage unit placement. All violations I'd personally flagged for follow-up that somehow never got addressed. In my experience, property managers who ignore safety violations tend to get very motivated when their own liability gets exposed. I filed fresh complaints using Brenda's own previous language almost word for word because I have that kind of sense of humor. The city inspector arrived at Brenda's duplex on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there, of course, but public records tell a beautiful story. Violations confirmed, fines totaling $2,400, mandatory corrections within 30 days, or face tenant relocation assistance requirements. Her tenants received notices the same afternoon. Friday evening, I was loading groceries when Brenda confronted me in the Walmart parking lot. 3 witnesses, including Mrs. Henderson from our street, watched as our HOA president completely lost her composure. "You think you're so smart with your little code book?" she snarled, her voice carrying across rows of shopping carts. "Some problems can't be solved with paperwork, Marcus. Some problems require more creative solutions. The squeaky grocery cart wheels and fluorescent light buzz created an oddly suburban soundtrack to what felt like a mob movie threat. Other shoppers backed away like we were radioactive. "Are you threatening me, ma'am?" I asked calmly, making sure my voice carried to our audience. "I'm just saying," she replied. "Accidents happen. House fires, gas leaks. Sometimes old properties just develop problems." Mrs. Henderson's gasp was audible from 20 feet away. That night, Elena and I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset paint our vegetable garden golden. The peace felt fragile now, like something beautiful that someone was planning to break. "The community's split," Elena observed. "Half the neighborhood thinks we're dangerous lunatics, and half thinks Brenda's lost her mind." She was right. The HOA members had fractured into camps: Team Brenda, recent transplants and investment property owners; Team Marcus, long-term residents and families; and the neutrals, mostly retirees trying to avoid conflict. But something else was happening that made my investigator instincts scream warnings. I'd started receiving anonymous calls at work, someone asking about my patrol schedule, my typical routes home, when I usually inspected properties. The caller always hung up before I could trace the number. Then Dakota mentioned something that made my blood freeze. "Dad, some guy in a pickup truck asked me yesterday if you were home. He said he was a delivery driver, but he didn't have any packages." That's when I realized this had moved beyond neighborhood dispute into something much more dangerous. And I started watching our security cameras a lot more carefully. Brenda's next move proved she wasn't just vindictive, she was strategic. If social pressure wouldn't work, she'd attack my livelihood directly. Monday morning, my supervisor Dave called me into his office with the expression of a man delivering terminal diagnosis news. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about a formal complaint filed against you." The allegations were precise, professional, and devastating. Abuse of position, using city resources for personal vendettas, intimidating citizens through selective enforcement. Brenda had provided evidence timestamps showing my property research during work hours, copies of my complaints against her, even witness statements claiming I'd threatened her with regulatory retaliation. "You know this is bullshit, right?" Dave said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. "But Internal Affairs has to investigate. I'm sorry, Marcus, but I have to reassign you pending review." The fluorescent conference room lights hummed like angry wasps during my 3-hour interview. Coffee grew cold while a stenographer's pen scratched across paper, documenting every question about my professional conduct. 25 years of spotless service reduced to timestamps and he said, she said accusations. Temporary reassignment to minimize appearance of impropriety meant I'd be shuffling papers in the basement while Brenda painted me as a corrupt official. The irony tasted bitter as burnt coffee. But I'd learned something during my years chasing down fraud cases. Desperate people make bigger mistakes. Time for my third counterpunch. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all city communications regarding my property. Every email, phone call, meeting note, and complaint. What came back was a masterclass in coordinated harassment. Brenda hadn't just contacted my department. She'd reached out to the city attorney, mayor's office, planning commission, and health department. Same script every time, like she was reading from a telemarketer's playbook. More importantly, this pattern matched exactly what I found in public records from her previous cities. The woman had turned harassment into a science. Elena started photographing every coincidental encounter: Brenda jogging past our house 5 times daily, unfamiliar cars slowing at our driveway, neighbors who suddenly needed to walk their dogs right by our fence. We instructed the twins to record any adult who approached them with questions about our family. I installed a comprehensive security system, every camera and sensor legal as property owner surveillance. The red blinking of motion detectors mixed with the digital hum of recording equipment, turning our peaceful home into something that felt like a fortress. The psychological pressure was working exactly as Brenda intended. Sleep came in fragments between checking camera feeds. Elena jumped at unexpected noises. The kids asked why we couldn't just be normal neighbors like everyone else. Then came the emergency HOA board meeting. Our neighbor Terry Wilson, one of the fence sitters trying to avoid taking sides, knocked on our door Thursday evening with information that made my stomach drop. "They're calling for a vote tomorrow night," he said, shifting nervously on our porch. "Something about hiring a property management company to deal with community threats. Brenda's got 3 new board members who moved in last month, and she's pushing for emergency assessment authority. Translation: they wanted to hire professional intimidation services with legal cover. I'd seen this in other cities, companies that specialized in making holdout properties develop problems until owners sold below market value. 3 longtime board members had already resigned rather than participate in what one called legalized extortion. Friday brought a new escalation that crossed every line. At 9:47 p.m., police arrived at our house responding to a domestic disturbance call. We were having dinner on our back porch, hardly the stuff of violent crime. The responding officer, someone I'd worked with for years, looked embarrassed. "Marcus, this is the 3rd false emergency call this month," Officer Rodriguez said, checking our obviously peaceful household. "Someone's playing games with 911 dispatch." I knew from my enforcement training that filing false emergency reports is a felony charge carrying up to 2 years in prison, but proving who made anonymous calls to 911 would require phone records and investigations beyond my current authority. My evidence file had grown to fill an entire cabinet: false reports, harassment timelines, financial research on Brenda, pattern analysis from other cities. Elena found me there one night, organizing documents like I was preparing for war. "You're building a case like you're expecting court," she observed. "Because I think that's exactly where this is heading," I replied, holding up property transfer records that showed the real scope of Brenda's operation. Then Sunday morning brought the escalation that turned harassment into attempted murder. I found our chickens dead in their coop, their water contaminated with antifreeze. The acrid chemical smell burned my nostrils as I knelt beside birds that had been our family's daily joy. Dakota's tears mixed with my rage as we buried justice, liberty, and hope names the kids had chosen that now seemed prophetic. The veterinary report confirmed antifreeze poisoning. Security footage showed a figure in dark clothes entering our property at 3:17 a.m., too blurred for identification but clearly deliberate. But the real breakthrough came when I discovered the vandalism wasn't random teenage mischief. Our workshop door had been spray painted with "Move" in red letters. Security footage caught the perpetrator, a teenage boy from an HOA family. When I tracked down the kid through license plate numbers, his tearful confession revealed something that changed everything. A neighborhood lady had paid him $200 to poison the chickens and spray paint our building. The boy didn't know her name, but his description was unmistakable. Platinum blonde, white Lexus, yoga pants uniform. Instead of pressing charges against a minor being used as a pawn, I documented the payment source and added it to my growing case file. The real target wasn't a confused teenager, it was the adult orchestrating a criminal conspiracy. "Elena," I said that night, spreading bank records and timeline charts across our kitchen table, "we're not dealing with neighborly harassment anymore. We're dealing with organized crime. 3 a.m. is when the best detective work happens, when your brain is tired enough to see patterns it normally misses, and desperate enough to dig through archives most people ignore." I was hunched over my home office computer, surrounded by empty coffee cups and highlighted documents, when Elena shuffled in wearing her bathrobe and concerned expression. "Still hunting for your smoking gun?" she asked, setting down fresh coffee that smelled like salvation. "More like hunting for the puppet master," I muttered, clicking through municipal contract archives I'd accessed through my city login, because nothing about this feels random anymore. That's when I found it, buried in filing cabinets most people never knew existed. The original HOA incorporation documents from 2018 contained a clause I'd never seen before: Emergency Property Acquisition Protocol. The language was dense legal speak that basically translated to one terrifying concept. The HOA board could force the sale of any property deemed a community threat through municipal partnership agreements. Elena read over my shoulder, her principal's training helping her decode bureaucratic language. "Emergency eminent domain?" she whispered. "Can they actually do that?" I was already cross-referencing signatures on the incorporation papers. City Council member Patricia Webb had signed off on the HOA's legal structure, the same Patricia Webb who currently chaired our zoning appeals board and voted on eminent domain cases. Webb's background made my investigator instincts start screaming. Former business partner with Brenda in California, current position controlling property acquisition appeals. And here's the kicker, she'd never declared this relationship as a conflict of interest. "Elena, look at this," I said, pulling up property transfer records. Similar HOA structures in Phoenix, Tucson, San Diego, all cities where Brenda operated before, same legal framework, same acquisition protocols, same mysterious property problems. The pattern was breathtaking in its scope. Target non-conforming properties, manufacture community crises, force buyouts through emergency procedures that bypassed normal appeals. The properties were then resold to developers at 300% markup through shell companies. Elena's research skills proved invaluable here. Using school district databases she had access to, she started tracing property transfers across state lines. What emerged was a business model disguised as community activism. "Marcus, look at these numbers," she said, highlighting transfer amounts on her laptop. 7 properties across 3 cities, all following the same timeline. They've made an estimated $2.1 million over 5 years. But the smoking gun came when I discovered recent changes to our city's fire inspection protocols. New policies required properties with agricultural elements to undergo quarterly inspections, policies authored by Councilwoman Webb and enacted exactly 60 days ago, 1 month before Brenda's first complaint against us. The timing was surgical in its precision. Property tax records revealed Brenda's shell company, Willowbrook Development LLC, incorporated 3 months ago with the stated purpose of residential property acquisition and improvement. Financial backing traced to an anonymous investment fund that led back to her California partners. Target properties, my home and 2 other non-HOA parcels worth a combined $1.8 million. "Elena," I said, leaning back in my chair as the full scope hit me like a physical blow, "they're not trying to get me to join the HOA. They're trying to steal my property. The harassment, the false reports, the social pressure campaign, none of it was about community standards or property values. It was about manufacturing justification for forced acquisition through legal loopholes they'd spent years perfecting." "So what do we do now?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. I looked at the evidence spread across our desk: municipal violations, undisclosed conflicts of interest, interstate fraud patterns, conspiracy to interfere with property rights. Then I smiled for the first time in weeks. "We used the law exactly the way it was meant to be used," I said, reaching for my phone. "Time to call in some favors and build a case that will make federal prosecutors very, very happy." The hunter was about to become the hunted. And unlike Brenda, I actually knew how to follow the rules. Time to assemble my team. And lucky for me, 25 years in municipal enforcement had earned me some very useful friends. First call went to Jake Morrison, my old college roommate who'd become an investigative reporter for the regional newspaper. I'd fed him tips on municipal corruption cases for years. This time, I needed him to return the favor. "Marcus, it's 3:30 in the morning," Jake's groggy voice came through the phone. "Jake, remember that favor you owe me from the city council bribery story? Time to collect. How'd you like to expose a multi-state property fraud conspiracy?" Suddenly, he sounded wide awake. "I'll be there in an hour." Second call. Carmen Rodriguez, Elena's law school friend who'd built a career fighting property rights violations. She specialized in taking on big corporations that bullied homeowners. This case was right in her wheelhouse. "Pro bono case with national implications for HOA overreach," Carmen said after I explained the situation. "Marcus, you had me at federal conspiracy charges." Third call. Tom Morgan, a forensic accountant whose elderly parents I'd helped navigate code compliance issues last year. Tom could trace money through shell companies like a bloodhound following scent trails. "Someone tried to steal your house through legal fraud?" Tom's voice carried the indignation of someone who took financial crimes personally. "Oh, we're going to nail these people to the wall." By dawn, my workshop had been converted into a war room that would make FBI task forces jealous. Bulletin boards covered every wall, connected with colored string mapping relationships between players. Financial flowcharts traced money movements across state lines. Timeline boards showed the progression from harassment to attempted arson. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the rustle of document pages and the scratch of markers on whiteboards as we built our case. Carmen spread legal precedents across my workbench like a general planning invasion strategy. "Civil conspiracy requires 3 elements," she explained, highlighting relevant case law. "Agreement between parties, overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, and resulting damages. We have recorded conversations proving agreement, documented harassment as overt acts, and property devaluation plus emotional distress for damages." Tom's laptop hummed as he traced financial connections through public records. The Corporate Transparency Act legislation most people ignored required shell companies to file beneficial ownership reports. What Tom found made us all whistle in appreciation. $4.2 million investment fund, he announced, pulling up incorporation documents. 7 silent partners, all with addresses in California. And here's the beautiful part: 2 of them have previous fraud investigations in federal databases. Jake outlined his media strategy while photographing our evidence boards. I'm calling this series the HOA Hustle: How Neighbors Become Predators. Local story with national relevance. HOA abuse affects 73 million Americans. We coordinate publication with your legal filings for maximum impact. I'd upgraded our security system with professional-grade equipment, taking advantage of Texas's one-party consent laws for recording conversations. Anyone who stepped foot on our property was now being documented in high definition with backup cloud storage. As I'd learned from years of building legal cases, good documentation beats good lawyers every time. Elena organized a concerned parents' coffee meeting, ostensibly to discuss school safety issues. Her real purpose was identifying HOA members uncomfortable with Brenda's increasingly aggressive tactics. 3 families quietly provided internal HOA communications that revealed fractures in Brenda's support base. The intelligence goldmine, an emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday, where Brenda planned to force a vote on property acquisition proceedings. Our evidence package grew into 3 distinct attack vectors: criminal referral to the district attorney for wire fraud, conspiracy, and filing false reports; civil complaint for conspiracy to interfere with property rights and intentional infliction of emotional distress; ethics complaint against Councilwoman Webb for undisclosed conflicts of interest. Carmen coordinated our timing with military precision. T-3 days, we file the ethics complaint forces Webb to recuse herself from any property votes. T-2 days, civil lawsuit creates public record and triggers media interest. T-1 day, criminal referral escalates to law enforcement matter. T-day, Jake's story publishes and creates maximum public pressure. But we needed inside access to Friday's emergency HOA meeting. That's where our neighbor Terry Wilson, still trying to stay neutral, proved invaluable. HOA meetings were technically public under state law, and Terry agreed to attend with his phone streaming live video. If they vote for property acquisition, I explained to the team, we'll have real-time evidence of conspiracy in action. We prepared backup plans for every scenario. If the legal strategy failed, media exposure would still destroy Brenda's business model. If they accelerated their timeline, we had emergency injunction papers ready to file. If they tried targeting team members, Tom had already established contact with FBI Interstate Fraud Division. Personal preparations felt like preparing for siege warfare. Elena took leave from school. The twins went to stay with grandparents. I arranged temporary security for Elena's workplace and established a legal defense fund from our savings. The final piece fell into place when Carmen discovered precedent from a similar case in Nevada. Thorne versus Kensington is going to become case law, she said with satisfaction. Win or lose, this fight changes how HOAs operate nationwide. Friday morning arrived, gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Elena found me checking equipment one final time. Ready for war? She asked. I looked at our evidence, our team, our legally bulletproof strategy. Then I smiled. Elena, I've been ready for this fight my entire career. Time to show these people what happens when you pick on someone who actually knows the rules. If I thought Brenda was desperate before, I was about to learn what real desperation looked like. And honestly, it was terrifying in its creativity. Tuesday morning brought news that made my blood run cold. Brenda's home had been burglarized overnight, a break-in so convenient it practically had a neon sign reading, "False Flag Operation." According to her police report, the thieves had stolen membership files, financial records, and her computer hard drive. Nothing valuable like jewelry or electronics, mind you. Just the exact documents that would contain evidence of her harassment campaign. But here's where Brenda showed her amateur hour. She filed an insurance claim the same day, listing items that were never mentioned to police. I'd seen this exact technique in Phoenix and Tucson manufacture a crisis, destroy evidence, and paint the target as an extremist threat. The responding detective, a sharp woman named Lisa Park, seemed skeptical from the start. "Ma'am, this doesn't look like a real burglary," she told Brenda during questioning. "Nothing valuable taken, no signs of forced entry, and your security system was mysteriously malfunctioning?" When Detective Park interviewed me about my suspicious activity, I had an ironclad alibi. Family dinner at Elena's parents', complete with restaurant receipts and security footage showing me 20 miles away during the supposed break-in. Jake's journalism contacts at the insurance company confirmed what I suspected. Brenda had increased her coverage by 400% just 2 weeks earlier. The same pattern had emerged in her previous cities before accidents started happening to holdout properties. Filing fraudulent insurance claims is a felony that escalates misdemeanor harassment into serious federal territory. Brenda had just handed us another rope for her legal hanging. Her next move was pure theater, an emergency community safety meeting in the HOA clubhouse. 40-plus residents showed up, along with a police liaison and city council observer. The smell of fear and expensive perfume mixed with the artificial vanilla scent of those plug-in air fresheners that make everything smell like a department store. Brenda's PowerPoint presentation was masterful propaganda professional slides about property value protection and community standards, complete with carefully edited photos of our property that made our workshop look like a meth lab and our chicken coop resemble a disease breeding facility. "We're not here to persecute anyone," she said with practiced sincerity. "We're here to protect our children and our investments from neighbors who refuse to follow basic community guidelines." But I'd come prepared. I arrived with Carmen, who introduced herself as family attorney in a voice that could cut glass. My statement was calm, factual, and devastating, a timeline of harassment backed by documentation that made several residents gasp audibly. Photos of poisoned chickens, copies of false police reports, financial records showing Brenda's shell companies, property research showing her pattern across multiple states. "Ladies and gentlemen," I concluded, "this isn't about community standards. This is about organized fraud disguised as neighborly concern." The audience reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several longtime residents approached afterward to apologize privately for believing Brenda's narrative. But the real payoff came in the parking lot. Brenda confronted me beside my truck, her composure finally cracking in front of 6 witnesses, including Terry Wilson with his phone recording. "You think you're so smart?" she snarled, her voice carrying across the asphalt. "Sometimes old houses just have accidents, electrical fires, gas leaks. Insurance companies pay out all the time." The words hung in the night air like toxic smoke. 6 residents heard her make a specific threat to my property. Terry's phone captured every word in high-definition audio. In my 25 years of law enforcement training, I'd learned that threats to property combined with prior harassment patterns constitute criminal conspiracy, especially when the threatener had a documented history of properties mysteriously developing problems. Wednesday morning brought official escalation that proved our federal conspiracy theory. I received a certified letter from the city planning office. Preliminary assessment for emergency property acquisition proceedings. Signature: Councilwoman Patricia Webb. Timeline: 72 hours for property owner response. Translation: the legal framework for forced sale had been activated. Webb's involvement was the smoking gun we needed. Her undisclosed business relationship with Brenda, combined with official abuse of eminent domain procedures, violated multiple federal statutes about public corruption. Carmen immediately filed for emergency injunction while Tom traced the money trail showing direct financial benefit to Webb through the acquisition process. The forensic accounting revealed a kickback scheme that made my municipal enforcement training feel like kindergarten. But Thursday brought the discovery that made me realize we were running out of time. Tom's financial analysis revealed something that made my hands shake. Brenda had increased fire insurance on neighboring properties by 400% in the past month. Her reason? Concerned about potential fire spread from agricultural property. She wasn't just planning to force us out through legal proceedings. She was expecting or planning a fire at our house. The insurance paperwork was dated 1 week before her first harassment complaint. The woman had been planning arson from day one. New security footage confirmed our worst fears. The same rental truck had circled our property at 2 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights. License plate traced to a company paid for with cash using fake identification. 2 men with surveying equipment and cameras had been mapping our property, not for inspection, but for operational planning. Elena's discovery at school made everything click into terrifying focus. Maintenance reports mentioned chemical smell complaints from school buses passing our street. Timeline matched perfectly with diesel fuel odors concentrated near storm drains around our property. Someone had been placing accelerants around our neighborhood for weeks. Friday evening, I found diesel-soaked rags in the storm drain 50 feet from our house, strategically placed near our natural gas meter and electrical junction box. Professional arson setup designed to look like an accidental electrical fire. I called Carmen with hands that barely worked. We're out of time. They're going to burn time for the most dangerous chess move of my life, letting them think they'd won while documenting their crimes in real time. I evacuated Elena and the twins to her sister's house under the cover story of a romantic weekend getaway. Social media posts showed happy family photos from 30 miles away while I prepared for what might be the longest night of my career. Jake and I established our surveillance position in the abandoned barn across the creek, close enough to capture everything, far enough to stay safe if things went sideways. Our equipment looked like something from a spy movie: night vision cameras, direct lines to fire department dispatch, and backup power systems in case they cut our electricity. The waiting was brutal. Every sound made my pulse spike wind through trees, distant cars, the creak of old wood settling, the smell of October night air mixed with diesel fumes still lingering from their preparation work. 2:17 a.m. brought the rental truck we'd been tracking for weeks. Two men in dark clothing emerged like shadows, moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. They parked 2 blocks away and approached our property on foot, carrying gasoline cans and what looked like timing devices. My hands shook as I adjusted camera angles to capture faces clearly. These weren't local kids hired for vandalism. This was arson for hire, probably costing Brenda $10,000 minimum. Jake whispered commentary into his recorder while I documented everything through high-definition video. License plate numbers, physical descriptions, methodology evidence that would hold up in federal court. The accelerant placement was sickeningly professional. Foundation corners first, then workshop walls, finally the area around our electrical meter and gas line. Timing devices suggested they wanted the fire to start after dawn, when neighbors would assume we were inside sleeping. 47 minutes from arrival to departure, long enough to ensure complete destruction, short enough to avoid detection. My restraint nearly broke watching them douse the workshop where I'd built Dakota's treehouse and restored Elena's grandmother's rocking chair. But premature intervention would only get me arrested while letting the real criminals escape. 3:15 a.m. I called the fire department with a suspicious chemical smell report. Response time was 8 minutes, fast enough to prevent ignition, slow enough that the arsonists were gone. Fire Marshal Rodriguez, who'd worked with me on previous investigations, took one look at the setup and whistled low. "Marcus, this would have looked like an electrical fire, but burned hot enough to be completely destructive," he said, photographing timing devices and accelerant patterns. "Professional job. Someone paid serious money for this." The 2 perpetrators made their fatal mistake at the 24-hour diner 4 miles away. Security cameras caught them celebrating with cash payments and discussing their next job. When state police arrested them based on our license plate information, they had fake IDs, $5,000 each in sequential bills, and burner phones with only one contact. The contact traced directly to Brenda's investment account. Charges included conspiracy to commit arson, attempted destruction of property, and crossing state lines to commit felonies. Federal crimes carrying 20-year sentences. 5 a.m. brought my favorite part of the entire ordeal: Brenda's arrest. State police caught her at the interstate on-ramp with suitcases and her laptop, clearly attempting to flee before news of the arrests broke. The USB drive in her purse contained property valuations, acquisition timelines, and communications with the arsonists. Additional charges: flight to avoid prosecution, conspiracy to commit fraud, and my personal favorite, interstate transportation of stolen property, since her laptop contained HOA financial records she'd claimed were stolen in the fake burglary. 6 a.m. Jake's story went live with the headline, "HOA President Arrested in Arson Plot." By noon, CNN, Fox News, and NBC had all requested interviews. Social media exploded with #HO arson trending nationally. Marcus's story was shared 50,000 times in the first hour, with comments pouring in from victims of similar harassment campaigns. The political fallout was swift and satisfying. Councilwoman Webb submitted her resignation at 10 a.m. with a statement about personal reasons. The FBI announced a broader investigation into municipal corruption by lunch. The mayor called an emergency press conference to announce complete review of all HOA-related city policies and zero tolerance for abuse of municipal authority. And the remaining HOA board members held their own emergency meeting, unanimously voting to dissolve the acquisition protocol and ban all property targeting activities. Their public apology took out a full-page newspaper ad acknowledging wrongdoing and promising $25,000 in restitution to our family. Federal prosecutors announced RICO charges were pending against the entire network-organized criminal enterprise operating across state lines to defraud property owners. Asset seizure orders froze all properties acquired through fraudulent schemes, with funds going into a victim restitution account. Carmen's civil lawsuit was shaping up to exceed $500,000 in damages, while Brenda faced losing her real estate licenses in 3 states. But the most satisfying moment came when other residents started coming forward with their own harassment stories. 6 families had been systematically targeted over 2 years using identical methods. The pattern was finally broken. The professional predator had become the prey. Elena found me that evening, sitting on our back porch and watching the sunset paint our saved vegetable garden in golden light. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like justice," I said, raising my coffee cup in a toast to the security cameras that had captured everything. Slow, methodical, legally bulletproof justice. The courthouse steps had never seen a crowd like this. 200 supporters, news crews from 4 cities, and enough reporters to staff a small newspaper. The morning air buzzed with camera shutters clicking like electronic insects, and microphones thrust forward like weapons seeking truth. Elena, Dakota, River, and I walked up those steps with the calm confidence of people who'd done everything by the book. The twins had insisted on coming, wanting to see justice happen in real life, as River put it. Inside the courthouse, Judge Patricia Morrison read the charges against Brenda with the gravity they deserved. 17 felony counts including conspiracy, attempted arson, wire fraud, and interstate criminal enterprise. 8 misdemeanor counts for filing false reports and harassment. Brenda's appearance shocked everyone who'd known her as the polished HOA president. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs, and the defeated posture of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed overnight. The platinum blonde hair looked unwashed, and her famous composure had cracked like cheap paint. Federal prosecutor David Morgan laid out the case with prosecutorial precision. The defendant orchestrated a systematic campaign of harassment, fraud, and attempted destruction of property spanning multiple states and involving millions of dollars in fraudulent transfers. Bail was set at $250,000, reflecting both flight risk and the severity of charges. Brenda's family sat in stunned silence as the woman who terrorized our neighborhood was led away in shackles. The press conference afterward felt like vindication with a microphone. We stood on the courthouse lawn with our burned property visible in the background, a perfect visual reminder of how far this conspiracy had gone. Jake had coordinated with national media, turning our local story into a symbol of HOA abuse nationwide. "This was never about HOAs versus property rights," I said, looking directly into the CNN camera. "This was about criminals using community organizations as cover for theft. Good neighbors don't threaten each other, they help each other." The first reporter's question hit exactly the emotional note I'd expected. "Mr. Thorne, how does it feel to see your tormentor in handcuffs?" "Honestly, I feel sad that it came to this," I replied, meaning every word. "Elena and I just wanted to live peacefully and raise our children. We never asked for this fight." Elena stepped up to the microphone forest with the natural authority of someone who'd spent decades managing teenagers. "The message this sends to other HOA conflicts is simple. Document everything, know your rights, and remember bullies count on you being too afraid or too tired to fight back." The community support was overwhelming. Neighbors held signs reading, "We stand with Marcus," and "Property rights equals American rights." Dakota and River's classmates had come with their parents, turning the courthouse lawn into something resembling a hometown parade. In a moment that perfectly captured the absurdity of the whole situation, our neighbor Mrs. Patterson brought 2 rescued chickens as replacements for our poisoned flock. The gentle clucking mixed with children's laughter and warm afternoon sunshine, creating the kind of wholesome scene Brenda had claimed to be protecting. Carmen delivered the legal victory speech that made law students across the country cheer. Federal prosecutors announced that investigation had revealed a multi-state fraud network targeting homeowners in at least 7 cities. "RICO charges are pending against the entire criminal enterprise," she announced with visible satisfaction. "All properties acquired through fraudulent schemes are subject to federal asset forfeiture, with proceeds going into a victim restitution fund." But the moment that made highlight reels nationwide came when a reporter asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Thorne, do you have any advice for HOA boards watching this case?" I paused, looked directly into the camera, and smiled the smile of someone who'd spent 25 years learning the rules inside and out. Yes, read the municipal codes before you try to break them. And remember, some of us wrote those codes. The follow-up question gave me the perfect setup. Any other advice for boards dealing with non-conforming properties? "The law isn't complicated," I said. "Respect your neighbor's rights, follow proper procedures, and focus on genuine community improvement instead of personal profit. It's that simple." Jake's live broadcast that evening featured our family in what he called the most American interview of the year. Elena's message resonated with parents nationwide. Our children learned that standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's always worth doing. The symbolic moment came when we returned to our property that evening. I planted a new oak tree where our house had once stood for strength and longevity. I explained to the cameras still following our story. Community members brought soil from their own gardens, turning the tree planting into a reconciliation ceremony. Dakota and River helped water the sapling while neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up finally found their voices. The rich earth smell mixed with cool water soaking into soil, and a gentle breeze rustled through leaves that would grow tall long after this story ended. National media picked up our story as a symbol of ordinary Americans refusing to be bullied. CNN ran "The HOA Arson Plot," one man's fight for property rights. Fox News featured "When Neighbors Become Criminals." NBC produced "The Code Enforcer Who Enforced Justice." Social media exploded with our story shared over 500,000 times, spawning a # property rights movement that would influence legislation in 12 states. Judge Morrison's sentencing statement became legal precedent. This case represents a clear abuse of community authority for personal gain. Brenda received 8 years federal prison and $2.3 million in restitution. Webb got 4 years state prison and lifetime ban from public office. That evening, we celebrated not in vindictive triumph, but in quiet satisfaction that justice still worked in America. The victory celebration in Community Park drew 150 residents, including former Brenda supporters who'd finally seen the truth. "We're not celebrating someone's downfall," I told the crowd. "We're celebrating the fact that justice still works when good people use the law properly." 6 months later, the sound of hammers echoing across our property had replaced the sinister silence of that terrible week. Our new home rose from the ashes, literally incorporating the best of our old craftsman design with modern upgrades that would make any code enforcer proud. Insurance settlements totaled $425,000, $340 for the structure, $85 for contents and emotional distress. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, an advanced security system protected every corner, and my expanded workshop buzzed with projects again. The smell of fresh lumber mixed with morning coffee as Elena and I planned our future from the same wraparound porch, rebuilt exactly where it belonged. The community transformation was even more satisfying than our personal recovery. HOA members had voted unanimously to dissolve their organization entirely, replacing it with a voluntary neighborhood association focused on social events and genuine improvement instead of control and intimidation. Elena was elected as informal coordinator. They called her neighborhood friend instead of president, and 23 of 28 families actively participated in activities that actually brought people together. Block parties replaced board meetings. Garden tours replaced violation inspections. The difference was night and day. My professional recognition turned into opportunities I'd never imagined. Promotion to Regional Director of Code Enforcement Education came with speaking engagements at municipal conferences across 3 states. My training program, Ethical Enforcement and Community Relations, was adopted by 47 cities seeking to prevent the kind of corruption we'd exposed. Elena established the Dakota and River Thorne Education Foundation using a portion of our legal settlement plus community donations. The scholarship fund supported students who demonstrated civic courage, kids willing to stand up for what's right even when it wasn't popular. Our first 3 recipients were planning careers in law, journalism, and public service. The legal legacy extended far beyond our neighborhood. Thorne versus Kensington was cited in 23 subsequent property rights cases across the country. Federal legislation called the Homeowner Protection Act included our case as a primary example in congressional testimony. 3 states passed enhanced penalties for HOA harassment with mandatory disclosure requirements based on our evidence. Jake's Pulitzer nomination for the series on municipal corruption brought national attention to issues most people never knew existed. Netflix produced the HOA conspiracy documentary with Elena and me as consultants, reaching millions of viewers who'd never heard of property rights abuse. Elena wrote Standing Ground, A Family's Fight for Home and Justice, which became required reading in several law school property rights courses. Our speaking circuit expanded nationwide, sharing our story at conferences where we met dozens of families fighting similar battles. The annual Good Neighbor Day festival in our community park became a regional attraction. This year's celebration drew over 200 residents from surrounding neighborhoods, all gathering around the oak tree, now 3 feet tall, that served as our centerpiece for reconciliation ceremonies. Dakota chose journalism as her career path, like Mr. Jake, while River set his sights on environmental law to protect people's right to have chickens. Elena's election to the school board created opportunities to advocate for civic education curriculum that would teach kids about their rights before they needed to fight for them. Most importantly, our example sparked national conversation about the balance between community standards and property rights. 47 states introduced HOA reform legislation citing our case. Congressional hearings on HOA abuse included Elena's testimony about the human cost of unchecked authority. The Willowbrook approach became a model studied by urban planning programs, proof that neighborhoods could maintain standards through cooperation rather than coercion. Our chickens returned too, naturally. Heritage breed birds named Justice, Liberty, Freedom, and Hope provided fresh eggs and endless entertainment for visiting grandchildren. Their contented clucking mixed with children's giggles and morning sun warming the new coop Elena had designed with artistic flair. But the most satisfying moment came last week, when my phone rang with a familiar request. Mr. Thorne, my name is Sarah. I'm in Phoenix, and my HOA is trying to force me to remove my vegetable garden. I found your story online. Can you help? Elena laughed when I started packing the car. Here we go again. Road trip to Arizona, I confirmed, loading my trusty municipal code books and evidence collection kit. Because apparently, we're in the property rights business now. The fight for home and justice never really ends. It just moves to the next neighborhood that needs help. And Elena and I wouldn't have it any other way. Have you or someone you know faced HOA harassment? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else know they're not alone. If this story inspired you to stand up for your rights, hit that subscribe button. Every week we share real stories of ordinary people who refuse to be bullied and won. Because sometimes David really does beat Goliath.
You've been watching HOA Stories, where entitled Karens get a reality check. If this episode gave you secondhand rage or satisfaction, hit that like, leave your take in the comments, and subscribe so you're the first in line for more weekly HOA chaos.